Fabian. Or
uninspired. I'd say we are the on-time crew here.
indeed. Hey, John.
Hey, John.
Hey, Greg. Hey, Fabian. Oh, I love your background.
Thank you. I thought, if I just put on like leafy spring colors, it will maybe get warmer outside, but unfortunately, it's pretty gray and dark.
Hey, Alex, Stephen.
Hello.
DJ is not going to make it. He had a conflicting meeting.
Oh, me too. Oh, sorry. I'm kidding. Sorry.
Yeah, the Mattermost call happens this time. That's where he's at.
I do have a cat though, so attendance is slightly higher than what it looks like.
By the way, have we everyone forwarded this invitation to the team members?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, try to send.
There are 31 guests. We have 10 who accepted, a few maybes, and 14 awaiting.
No. One loser forgot to do that.
Oh, you didn't invite
I'm sorry.
the database group.
No worries. Just when you get a chance, just to forward. We want to see as many people as possible.
All right, we can get into this for recording and posterity, and then we can talk about next steps afterwards. So let's see. Oh, crap, I need to scroll. Sorry. So starting off with praise, Stephen, you are first. What praise do you have for the team?
Sure thing. Yeah, 14.6 obviously was a lot of it happened over the holidays, and so the holiday season brought many challenges, both from a resource and in the technical complexity. I think we bid off Kubernetes 1.2.2 upgrade during this release, and that went from smaller than a bread box to pretty big. Actually, Mitch is here and can comment. But in general, we were a little slower than we expected, but we did make significant progress, right? It wasn't like we just pushed these technical problems off and waited till folks were around. We were able to continue to make progress, get ourselves in a position for 14.7 to complete it.
Cool. Thanks for that. CZ is up next. He's not here, so I will verbalize for him on the next two bullets. So CZ says, thanks to the team members who provided on-call coverage during the holiday time at the end of the year. There was lots of participation there, so thanks everybody. And CZ also calls out kudos to Zach Cuddy for helping with the global search UI code refactor. Fabian, you are covering for Nick.
Yeah, one thing that stood out last release is that Akriti, who is now on parental leave, did a great job shepherding along quite a few data types for Geo in the self-service framework. So she really achieved her goal of having all 4 data types verified. I think it was a big success moment. And I think with all of the stresses during the holidays and all the other things, that worked out really well.
Awesome. All right, Alex, you are up next.
Yeah, I think the database team did a great job wrapping up our phase 4 blockers for the sharding group. So you're welcome, Craig. Did we wrap them up? I think we did them all.
Yes. And on that note, so I have the next 2 items. So it was noted by the sharding group that we've received great response from all the engineers with respect to domain knowledge when we ping them for loose foreign keys. And I think in general, especially lately, we've gotten great response when we've reached out for the phase 4 blockers. So thanks for everybody involved. And Pat had specific praise for Tong and the work that he did with the sharding group FCL for incident 5931. And Tong made some great improvements to enforce test coverage in CI. Okay, so if there is no other praise that folks want to add, then they can add it asynchronously to the issue. I'll move on to actions and follow-up. So CZ had one, and I will cover for him. So include issues under the GitLab.com namespace in the retro template, and there was a link to that. And it turns out all we need to do is change one setting in the YAML file to include issues in all the groups. So thanks CZ for following up on that. And then more of me talking. It looks like I'm going to cover for CZ under the what went well. So from the memory group, we made good progress on projects. Both new Redis instance for session keys and the new Sidekick metric servers are in production. And then from global search, we've created the production incident management documentation and are building up an abuse prevention framework. Fabian, covering for Nick.
Yeah, we had a really good 14.6 release overall, and we shipped the first iteration of secondary proxying. That was the headline feature for the release. We verified 4 more data types, and we also made progress configuring the tracking database in database YAML, which is also relevant to some of the sharding work. And that was, I think, overall a really great release of some work that had been in the making for a while, came to conclusion, which is always exciting. And some other work was iterated on within one milestone and didn't really, it was very uneventful to a certain extent. And that I think felt also really good to be able to do something swiftly that was very hard to do 6 months ago. So it was nice.
Okay, thanks. And then I have the next one from the sharding group. So we had a great discussion on the timing of deleting foreign keys for phase 4. This is an entirely new endeavor, so getting them out there into production has been great. So we've increased the number of loose foreign key definitions and started tracking their deletions. And we have even more good news for the next retro, but I will leave it for the next one. So on to what didn't go well. Stephen or Mitch, whoever wants to verbalize.
Yeah, I'll pass it over to Mitch for details, but back on the what's it called, the loose foreign key, I'd love to just have a link somewhere that explains like what that, for someone that may watch this later.
Yeah, I will.
Sure. I can provide that.
Yeah, just a link under that loose foreign key definitions, I think would be helpful for other engineers to know about, be aware. Cool. And then down to what didn't go well. I tipped my hand a little earlier on the Kubernetes 122 stuff and the complexity, but I'll pass it over to Mitch and give us a little deeper look at what the friction points are.
Yeah, sure. This upgrade has been really interesting in general. I think, since I've started here close to 2 years ago, there hasn't really been a big Kubernetes upgrade in this fashion, in the sense that there were so many APIs that were deprecated APIs that were removed entirely. And so, it's a pretty typical distribution process to have to deal with version skew between different tools. But this really complicated it even further, especially related to those deprecated APIs. So making sure that we still support people back to about Kubernetes 116, because there's demand for that, but also supporting people who are ready to move forward into the future into 122. 122 has actually been out for a few months now, so it got to the point where people were kind of curious where the updates were coming. And so what I think we've learned from it is that we can start looking forward better into upcoming releases and what deprecated APIs are going to come. And then we can look back to this 122 epic and see all the components that were required to upgrade and how we handled that in the past. So I think next time there's going to be a big removal of deprecated APIs, we'll be a lot better prepared for it. And the other perk of it is it forced us to clean up some technical debt items that we've had laying around, upgrading some components like Cert Manager and Nginx, which has been really great. So I think even though it turned into a big lift, I think it'll help us learn a lot in the future and do it a lot better next time.
Thanks, Mitch. Also, thanks to you and the team for digging in on that, pushing us forward. over to, I guess, back to Craig for CZ. Unless there's other questions on Kubernetes.
Nope. Okay. So what didn't go well? So from the memory group, the team felt that the Sidekick metric server extraction took too long, possibly due to first, the long review cycle around the holidays, and then second, lack of documentation. And then also from CZ for the global search, we found that we were not compatible with the latest open release search. So we need to investigate and come up with a plan on how we're going to deal with the support for Elasticsearch and OpenSearch. And issues are linked there. For me, from the sharding group, I didn't link to the retro because it wasn't called out in there, but we discovered that we needed to bring the loose foreign key implementation forward in the timeline. I think originally it was part of our phase 4 plan or phase 6, and we need to bring it forward to phase 4 as a result of some testing results that we discovered, which had a cascading impact to our overall timeline. So it wasn't great, but we have scrambled and adjusted and are making the best of it. So Alex, database.
Yeah, I didn't link to RDoc because we didn't talk about this time either, but I think partly related to the holidays, but we had very low participation in our retrospective again this month. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit more for next milestone, and hopefully increase our participation there and have more.
Yep. All right, Stephen, on what can we do to improve?
Gotcha. Yeah, I think leveraging off what Mitch was saying about having a better idea of what changes are happening, I think that's kind of the theme of what we've learned here, is that, you know, it was a long window where we didn't have to be aware of these changes, and then all of a sudden it felt like you know, we got thrown into the fire a little bit to get caught up. And so the idea of, like, you know, more upstream, I added this comment just this morning, more upstream visibility and participation. I think just we're so heads down on our piece of work that sometimes we lose, you know, sight of the whole ecosystem that we're built on top of. It's also something as we get into the hiring, adding that as maybe, you know, not a hard criteria, but folks that have worked in upstream on some of these projects that we use would be, you know, a nice checkbox to at least add if folks do have that level of participation. I think we've got the skill set, we just don't have the cycles. You know, the team is implementing our specifics into these Kubernetes clusters and not thinking about the underlying architecture. Mitch, anything else to add?
No, you covered it.
Sweet.
Steven, you got the next one too.
Next one, team makeup's changed. This is more on the planning side. I think, you know, we kind of walked into the holidays knowing that we had overcommitted more than we had liked. The situation kind of demanded it, but it's still something that I went back and looked at our numbers. I've been here for just, you know, coming up on my 3rd year, and we've had, you know, similar metrics in place. And so we've been able to kind of stabilize and understand our patterns. And I think we just need to, you know, put, you know, cognizant, I think is a good word. It's kind of like we know that it's there,
Yeah.
but we're not, you know, including it into our equation for scheduling as much as we probably should.
Yeah, I mean, anecdotally, from what I've seen of the teams, it seems like we should probably aim for like 50% capacity for December. Like, even though we may have higher goals to hit, like we think, oh yeah, we can do all this work. Stuff always comes up. People always extend. They feel burned out, or just like you said, just overcommit. So maybe we should just put a 50% capacity hard limit on December's.
Yeah, and I think maybe giving the product folks a heads up that, hey, December, because that's, you know, distribution in particular, we've kind of got this dual mode of product deliverables and then things that sort of come at us. So when other teams are scrambling, I won't say scramble, that's probably not what I should say. When other teams are active, it increases our overall level of activity in the form of MRs that come to the team.
That's true. Okay.
Cool. I think, well, yeah. Back to you, Craig. Sorry.
Yep. So again, covering for CZ for the memory group. So Matthias pointed out it's unclear what would need to be tested when rolling out gRPC upgrade involving GitLab and Gitly integration. So I'm assuming there is a follow-up action there. I will make sure there is. Fabian, on to you for Nick and Gio.
Yeah, I think we had an sort of example of where we tried to make something simpler by iterating and splitting something. So when you implement replication and verification for a new data type in Geo, you can do this in a single MR. And we chose to split it up in two, and in a hope that that would be easier because there was an issue with verification, but it essentially just doubled the amount of work necessary because we had to review them individually, and the next time we just do them together because there's a sort of a clear process on how to do it, and it's understood by reviewers by now. So I think that's a good lesson for the team to just keep them combined from now on, and that should stabilize. But I think an interesting learning for us as well.
Awesome, thank you. So Alex, the database item.
Yeah, so the database team is constantly in this struggle, kind of, which is between being more of a feature-focused team and SRE, right? And we're focused more towards development than SRE, right? And so this milestone, we spent a good amount of time discussing kind of what permissions levels team members should have. And mainly just like trying to understand how much access we needed in order to look into problems, but not so much that we're in a position where we're doing things that are far outside our scope, if that makes sense. So that was, I think, a good discussion for us to have as a team.
That's yeah, I agree with that assessment. And in addition to that, there's another perspective of from security perspective, minimal access to the system. So we need to keep that in mind, stick to that, because we are growing and the company is maturing. So the security policies we must stick to. It's no longer like early startup. Everybody can do everything. So we need to make sure we are compliant with the security guidelines, because we will be audited.
That's a really good point too, and we didn't talk that much about that, but I think that we settled. I think that we're largely settling on a position where we have fewer permissions rather than more. That said, probably more than a typical development team, but still not quite the level of access you get as an SRE.
And there is an ongoing audit for some permissions now. I won't get too deep into the details since this will eventually be publicly shared recording, but thanks for following up on that, Alex. All right, it looks like we have some time, so I asked some questions. So if memory serves, which half the time it doesn't serve me well, but this is the third enablement section retrospective, and I believe the original goal was to run it for 3 times and then get feedback on participation to see if we should continue this or revert back to the development department retro, or maybe some other outcome altogether. So I had some questions. So do folks find this new format valuable? And Stephen, you have the first answer, first response.
First responder. Yeah, I like this document, and I guess I should be clear that, just the issues by themselves, I'm not sure I would go and look at them all. But having just that snippet of context in the doc where like, hey, here's the friction point and here's where just it allows it to be kind of discoverable. And so typically I'll go through the, as the doc is populated and look at other teams, actual issues, and to kind of get a vibe or a feel for, what they're up against and how they resolved it or whatever. And so that's like, this part's okay. I don't mind using the time for this, but I do like having those issues. And I think, the team we've seen low participation, and I think the team probably also we're super asynchronous by nature. And so I think that kind of carries over into our retros as well. And the idea of a call to just read through bullets, I think is maybe doesn't have the draw. I like Fabian's response as well, and I'll hand it over to you, Fabian.
Yeah, thanks. I think the first thing to note is that this is my first participation, and I'm doing it to cover for Nick. So I have to say that so far I've not had it high up on my own agenda. That's maybe my own failing. Just from the one observation that I had, I think these sort of roll-ups can be most useful if we find patterns across the organization where people say like, hey, December was hard for those reasons, and then we can act on a sort of enablement level and say like, hey, we've had all of that input. This is maybe a problem across the org, and do something about that. I think other than this, meetings have a really high cost also for me. And if I can read the geo and database retro issues in my own time, let's say in the morning, and sort of get a feeling for what's going on, that's easier for me to do than another meeting in the afternoon. So I think the async work makes that sometimes a bit hard potentially.
So trying to understand, so maybe suggested format of this meeting, about the sync meeting is basically we jump onto identifying some patterns and discuss what we can do in the future, instead of reviewing what went well, what didn't go well. But we 1 week before this meeting, everybody think about what pattern of the issues they run into, and then discuss proposed action items for next. Basically, we just jump right onto this topic.
I think that would be great. I think also, I don't know, but if I knew as an individual contributor, if I raise an item in a retro, that everybody who manages folks in enablement will think about it and will try to act on it. I think that gives also incentive to raise these issues. Yeah, I don't know. I like that suggestion too.
Cool. Since we are all here, I'll bring this back, circle back, because some people are missing here. I'll circle back, see if everybody agrees, then we can take that approach next retro to see how that works, and pilot for 2 or 3 instances.
Yeah, I think rather than asking, it sounded like you said you're going to take it back and ask. I think we just do it, right? It sounds like we've got a quorum from the participants. So that's,
yeah, I'd agree on that.
So I totally agree. I second everything everybody said. So that being said, sometimes it's a forcing function for me to quickly get up to speed when it's being read out, because as Fabian said, there's a high meeting load for me personally, and coming into these meetings and having to read the bullets does force me to get involved and participate, but that's a failure on my part for not being prepared in advance. So I think switching the format will probably get folks to read it in advance and participate a little more. And we as managers of people can communicate this out like, hey, we're changing the format again, participation is expected, and your comments in a retro could trigger a deeper conversation in the department retro. So cool. Thank you. That's great. Chun, are you gonna drive the format change?
Yes, I will. I will do that. I will change the format at the beginning of this doc, that template. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, so next question. Do folks prefer the larger department retrospective? And I'm the only one that responded here, but I'll take responses from the audience after I verbalize. So most of the time for me, no. There have been occasions in the past where I learned something new, but those can be gleaned from other channels if I follow the keeping myself informed handbook entry. So, all right, people are typing frantically. Stephen, you got to know.
Yeah, same
Alex.
async rule applies here as well. Like, I like that it's in a doc, and I can, when I have cycles, I can kind of browse through and find interesting tidbits. But in terms of like just hanging out, and I think the more this is coming back to me, didn't they recently change the development retro to sort of pre-summarize key points and then, break a discussion down into groups?
So my impression of that new format was it was less related to like what we talked about our new format would be, like patterns or topics derived from the content of the retro. And it was more of, hey, suggest some topics that we can talk about and we'll vote on the top 2 and then we'll talk about those. So, so yes, format changed, but it's not quite what we are planning to do for the next one.
Gotcha.
So, so looks like we would not prefer the development level big retro. We want to stick to our sub-department level, smaller group.
Yes.
Yeah, it feels like the path is make changes to our retro, take some measurements, participation specifically, and then from there.
Personally, sorry, go ahead.
Guys, yeah, from there, then think about maybe a group thing, but it sounds like everyone likes the enablement or the overwhelming.
So personally, I think retrospectives are better smaller. In my experience, I haven't ever been to a development department retro, so like this is totally, maybe this is totally off the bounds for me. But I think the larger you get for a retrospective audience, the less actionable it becomes in a lot of ways.
So that's
sorry, go ahead, Chen.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, it becomes too many people to correct for unless there are major themes that you can bring up there. I have never seen a retrospective with more than 40 individual contributors under it come out with actionable items that succeeded.
Okay. The intention, the goal to break up the big retro to the sub-department is, one, make the issues more tangible, more relevant to the smaller group, make it more efficient, and also encourage participation. So we achieved part of the goals. The topics are more tangible and more relevant to us. The drawback here is we lose the global view, but we can sync back to other groups so that async communication can probably solve that problem. And moving forward, I think the consensus here is to stick sub-department level. So let's encourage our people to join this. And I'm not sure if I already changed the schedule, like alternate this to morning Pacific time and the late afternoon Pacific time. I will do that if that hasn't happened, so we can encourage more people to join this the retros.
I will note that below. Good. All right, so I think the question of do you prefer an alternative has already been answered through the discussions that we've had. So I will skip that. And if anybody is watching this and they want to provide async feedback, they can. I've linked it the retro below. Some observations. So participation in these last 3 is low. This is a pretty representative set. Typically it's just the managers, and I looked at the views for the last recordings. They were around 42 and 15, so people are watching it. More participation would be good. Yeah,
I think for the past, particularly the past ones, right? I think maybe it's not the best measurement.
Yep.
The best sample rate.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to the different format. I think it'll be more engaging, and if it's not, then we can try something different. So that's it for the agenda. Unless anybody has any other topics, then I think we can call it.
Thanks, Greg, for running it.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Bye.
With your accent,
running it.
Fabian, With
Right.
Fabian's accent, it sounded like he said, "Thanks, Craig, for ruining it." All right, see y'all later.